this audio mic quality is a lot better than the other ones. First of all, I want to cover this creepypasta, especially 'cause in my opinion, it was one of the first good ones out there. Um, so yeah, without further ado, I'm gonna get started in reading it. About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend the time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in the city were polite, but all that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was Wednesday, somewhere between 1 or 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police patrol park, quite a ways from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street, my side, was the silhouette of a man dancing in a strange dance similar to a waltz, but it finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance walking, headed straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass by. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky, and wearing an old suit. He danced closer still until I could make out his face. His eyes were open, wide, and wild, head tilted back slightly. Looking off at the sky, his mouth was formed into a painful white cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off him to cross the empty street. As I reached to the other side, I glanced back and then stopped dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me but looking skyward, smile still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move once I had put half a block between us. I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and the sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to where he had been standing to find him gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relieved until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away for him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved fast. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time, staring at him. And then he started moving towards me again. He took giant, exaggerated tiptoe steps as if he were in a cartoon character sneaking up on someone. Except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point I ran away, pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there completely frozen as the smiling man crept towards me. And then he stopped again, about a car's length away from me, still smiling his smile. Still looked to the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came out of my mind. What I meant to ask was, "What the fuck do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. What came out was a whispered, "What the fuck?" Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard my own voice, and it only made me more afraid. But he didn't react to it at all. He stood there smiling, and then after what felt like forever, he turned around very slowly and started dancing away. He just like that. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go until he was far enough away to almost be out of sight, and then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor he was dancing. I watched in horror as the distance shape of him grew longer and larger. He was coming back my way, and this time he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off the side of the road and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me, then he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months. After that night, I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk, he didn't look high, he looked completely and utterly insane. And that's a very, very scary thing to see. With all that being said, I always found this story to be creepy because, it was something believable, something that could happen to all of us. More specifically, I feel connected to it in some way. Although this is like a funny side story um, of my, well, I wasn't there, I didn't witness it. But back when I was in high school, there was this kid. He looked like gingered, basically. That sounds bad, I know. But basically, the guy was a junkie, and he wanted to be cool. Best way I could explain it to you, I think he had autism or something. There was something wrong with him, basically. What I'm trying to say. At the time, I had a friend group, and they were called the junkies, right? Because they were junkies. Most of them. Still in contact with some of them, but that's besides the point. What I'm trying to say is that he was trying to fit in, and one day he wanted to go buy weed. So he pulls up to downtown. Now, my downtown looks awful. Basically, at night, there's like prostitutes, homeless man. It gets crazy. What I'm trying to say. So that night, he decides, you know what? I'm gonna pull up to downtown. There's got to be someone selling weed out there, right? I mean, there is, but well, what happens is a homeless man manages to convince him, oh, I got weed, but you gotta pay me first. So he hands him the money, and the homeless man threatens him, telling him, if I ever see you here again, I'ma kill you. Now, for us, that was some hilarious shit, right? Like, how the fuck does that happen? Well, clearly it happened to him. How do you get robbed by a homeless man? What I'm trying to say. But, there's like other crazy things that he did. He's like a local to us, to everybody in this town. What I'm trying to say, it's a small town. Most everybody that I know knows him, and they know him for being fucking weird. What I'm trying to say. So to wrap it up, it really did terrify me, and the story is believable in many different ways. Um, I really did enjoy reading it. It was always one of my favorites when I was very, very young. I wanted to cover it because, in my opinion, it's a goated one. If y'all ever get the chance to read it, read it. It's genuinely good. One last thing before I leave. This story reminds me of like way back in the day, back when creepypastas were genuinely, I mean, they were bad because, Jeff the Killer, bro, like, come on. But, it takes me back to a certain time.